Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and this is Voice of the Global South, your weekly guide to everything that's happening in Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Asia and Oceania. All right, on the show this week, both Israel and Iran are wooing Saudi Arabia. Which way will Mohammed bin Salman go? Will he pick Israel over Iran? India's Act East policy completes 10 years. We take a look back at how it's redefining India's engagements in the Indo-Pacific. What's China up to in Cambodia? Satellite images seem to confirm fears of Beijing's creeping maritime expansion. And get ready to hop into an air taxi to beat the traffic because flying taxis are becoming a reality sooner than you think. All that and much more coming up on Voice of the Global South. Now, West Asia, or the Middle East as some call it, is on tenterhooks. Will Israel retaliate against Iran's retaliation against Israel's? You get the drift, don't you? Now, Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister, doesn't say when, but he's told his troops that it will be lethal, precise, and above all, surprising. His words, not mine. Now, Israel could, for instance, attack Iran's oil facilities, nuclear installations, carry out targeted assassinations, damage Iran's interests in third countries like it's already doing in Lebanon and Syria, or effect a regime change in Tehran, oust the mullahs and overthrow the government that's been in place since the 1979 revolution. It's all in the realm of possibility. Already, the son of the former king of Iran has spoken out against the government led by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. Reza Pahlavi is the son of the late king Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who ruled Iran till the 1970s. He advocates a return to monarchy though. So, Israel may hit Iran where it hurts. Let's assume for a moment that it will. Then the question you and I should be asking is the following. What will Saudi Arabia do? Which way will Mohammed bin Salman go? Which side will the Arabs take in an Iran-Israel war? Will the Saudi Arabia-Iran détente hold? And will a Saudi Arabia-Israel peace accord come through? Now, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, as he is known by his initials, is the Crown Prince and Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia. He is the de facto ruler of the kingdom, the heir apparent to the Saudi throne, the seventh son of King Salman, and a grandson of the kingdom's founder, King Abdul Aziz. Both Israel and Iran are wooing the Saudis. Saudi Arabia was about to normalize its relations with Israel until the Gaza conflict erupted last October. But the 7th October 2023 Hamas attacks in Israel stopped Saudi Arabia in its tracks. In contrast, Saudi Arabia has already normalized its ties with Iran. In March last year, Saudi Arabia and Iran agreed to restore their diplomatic ties after a gap of 7 years. Now, Saudi Arabia is not alone. More wealthy Gulf countries are shoring up their ties with Iran and giving assurances that they will not help Israel attack Iran. Take, for example, the UAE, or for that matter, Qatar. Now, most of these countries have traditionally been allies of the West, the US and its European allies. But these resource-rich monarchies have since grown closer to Iran after a long period of tension with their giant neighbor across the Gulf. as Israel prepares a response to Iran's 200-missile barrage on 1st October, the Gulf region is keen to project its neutrality in the conflict. The Gulf countries, led by Saudi Arabia, have pledged not to let Israel use their airspace for attacks on Iran. It follows Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian's recent visit to Doha, where he met Qatar's Emir and Saudi Arabia's foreign minister. Iran also dispatched its foreign minister Abbas Araghchi to Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Neil Quilliam from the London-based think tank Chatham House says Iran used the visits to send a message that Israel risks harming its ties with the UAE, Saudi Arabia and others if it starts a wider conflict. That's not all. More importantly, the message being sent out is that while Iran's relations with Saudi Arabia are warming, the prospect of Israel normalizing its ties with Saudi Arabia is diminishing. So, what explains Saudi Arabia's reluctance to overtly cooperate with Israel? The reasons are not far to seek. Oil-rich Saudi Arabia and the UAE have both been attacked and threatened by Iran-backed groups in the past, including the Houthis of Yemen, who temporarily halved Saudi crude oil production in 2019. The attack on Saudi Arabia's Aramco oil field shut down over 5% of global oil supply. Now, Aramco is Saudi Arabia's state-owned petroleum and natural gas company. It's the national oil company of Saudi Arabia. Similarly, in 2022, the Iran-aligned Houthis in Yemen fired missiles and drones at oil refueling trucks near an oil refinery owned by the UAE's state oil firm ADNOC. The Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, known by its acronym ADNOC, is the state-owned oil company of the UAE. So a repeat of that would cause regional oil supply disruptions, which in turn could have global ramifications, including a surge in oil prices. As Torbjorn Saltvedt of the UK-headquartered risk intelligence company Verisk Maplecroft explains, the main concern for the Gulf countries would be that Iranian retaliation could extend to attacks against their own energy infrastructure. Now, during meetings this week, Iran warned Saudi Arabia that it could not guarantee the safety of the kingdom's oil facilities if Israel were given any assistance in carrying out an attack on Iran. Clearly, Saudi Arabia and its allies in the Six-Nation Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, have to do a difficult balancing act. Now, the GCC comprises Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain and Oman. Iran has of late re-established ties with all GCC countries except Bahrain, which, by the way, has expressed an interest in normalizing its ties with Tehran. Today, all 6 GCC countries are engaged in direct and multilateral talks with Tehran. What you should also know is that the GCC foreign ministers held an informal meeting with their Iranian counterpart in Doha on 3rd October. It was the first meeting of its kind. Anna Jacobs of a Brussels-based think tank called International Crisis Group says the Gulf states are trying to leverage improved relations with Iran to avoid being caught in the middle of an Israel-Iran escalation. Remember, although Iran's missile attack on Israel drew condemnation from the West, the Arab Gulf states kept their own counsel. As Oman's foreign minister Badruddin Hamad al-Busaidi says, and I quote, "It's easy for certain governments to stand by and condemn Iranian actions, but that solves nothing, nor does the familiar policy of defending Israel come what may," unquote. The Omani minister goes on to say in a rather long post on X that a fully sovereign Palestinian state must be established. Now, that is a sentiment that's shared by Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman too. Saudi Arabia paused US brokered talks on recognizing Israel after the Gaza conflict broke out. Saudi officials say that Riyadh wants a pathway towards a Palestinian state as a condition of normalization. So in all likelihood, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar will not allow Israeli missiles to pass through. What about Jordan, you might ask? Well, Jordan has not revealed its mind just yet about which way it will go. When Iran attacked Israel in April, Jordan did shoot down some projectiles over its airspace. So Israel could still route its strikes through Jordan. But Israel has other options too, including mid-air refueling capabilities that will enable its jets to fly down the Red Sea into the Indian Ocean, proceed to the Gulf, and then fly all the way back. While jury is out on the wisdom and efficacy of an Israeli strike on Iran, U.S. President Joe Biden and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a 30-minute phone call on 9th October. They spoke about Israel's desire to hit back at Iran. The U.S. believes Iran is not about to make a nuclear weapon. But, and this is an important but, an attack could push Iran to build a nuclear weapon. Iran might also choose to pull out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And if that happens, certain other countries in the region would be tempted to expand their own nuclear programs, raising fears of a regional nuclear proliferation. Reports say the U.S. has specifically asked Israel not to target Iran's nuclear and energy facilities, but Netanyahu refuses to share his plan. For his part, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi quotes Newton's third law of motion to say that for every action, there is a reaction. He says Iran will give a stronger and more forceful response to any Israeli action. So as I said at the top of the show, this tit-for-tat cycle of violence is never-ending. Expect Iran to retaliate against Israel's retaliation to Iran's. You get the drift. Right, this year marks the completion of 10 years of India's Act East policy. It has influenced India's engagement with the Indo-Pacific region. The most significant contribution of this policy has been the expansion of India's diplomatic and geostrategic outreach to the ASEAN countries. Jayant Das reports from New Delhi.
"2024 marks the 10th anniversary of India's ambitious Act East policy, a necessary and long-due successor to its Look East policy. First announced by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on 13th November 2014 at the 9th East Asia Summit held in Myanmar, the Act East policy has added a new dimension to India's relations with the Indo-Pacific in general and the ASEAN nations in particular. The newfangled policy introduced the 4 C's of culture, connectivity, commerce and capacity building into the mix. A formula that has led to the growth of the partnership between India and ASEAN. The Look East policy solely focused on economic cooperation between India and the ASEAN countries. In contrast, the Act East policy has newer dimensions such as security cooperation. Also, it brought East Asian countries within its ambit. India aims to boost its ties with countries in the region and protect a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific region. The India-ASEAN Maritime Exercise of 2023 was a big step in ensuring readiness in cooperation between India and ASEAN in the event of a conflict. Since Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power in India in 2014, the engagements between India and the ASEAN countries have increased manifold. There have been 26 high-level visits and interactions in the past 10 years. This uptick in visits can only mean one thing: a broader development of the strategic and diplomatic ties between India and ASEAN. India began formal engagement with ASEAN in 1992 as a sectoral dialogue partner. Subsequently, in 1995, it became a dialogue partner. India's status was upgraded to a summit-level partner in 2002. And in 2012, India and ASEAN became strategic partners. The India-ASEAN trade reached $122 billion in 2023, a big jump from $9 billion in 2002. And this number is expected to cross $150 billion by the end of 2024. Currently, India is ASEAN's 7th largest trading partner, while ASEAN is India's 4th largest partner, with trade agreements helping in the growth. Many Indian companies and industries have found emerging markets in the ASEAN nations and are keen to expand their services there. There is immense scope for collaboration in the blue economy. Connectivity is another important component of the relationship. On this front, the development of two major projects is crucial. One, the under construction India-Myanmar-Thailand trilateral highway, and two, the Kaladan multi-modal transit transport. 7 of the 11 ASEAN nations have direct flight connectivity with India. Talks are underway for flights between India and Brunei. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had announced a $1 billion line of credit for the ASEAN countries in 2015 to further develop physical and digital connectivity. Technology is another important sector. Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to Singapore saw an important agreement on semiconductor industry signed between both countries. Furthermore, India has been helping not only ASEAN but many other countries in capacity building for technology and other knowledge and skills, such as the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. India allocated $5 million to the $1 billion already committed under the ASEAN India Science and Technology Development Fund. The Indian Space Research Organization is a close partner of ASEAN countries in the space sector. India and ASEAN share a deep cultural connect. Many initiatives have been launched to promote Buddhist heritage around the world. Projects such as the revival of Nalanda University and the International Buddhist Confederation have worked to reinforce spiritual and cultural connections with countries such as Myanmar, Thailand and Cambodia. Another key step included the exposition of the relics of the Buddha in Thailand in 2023. Besides these connections that the India-ASEAN ties enjoy, China's recent actions in the region have brought India and ASEAN closer together. The South China Sea tensions have only worsened, with tensions between China and some ASEAN countries reaching a flashpoint. China's belligerence not only threatens maritime peace, but also challenges the rules-based order in the entire Indo-Pacific region. The issue of China was undoubtedly among the points of discussion at the just concluded 21st India-ASEAN Summit in Laos. During his recent visit to Laos for the ASEAN-India Summit, Prime Minister Modi presented a 10-point proposal for ramping up the partnership in fields such as security, digital infrastructure, trade and economy. This year, the stakes are even higher, what with global tensions on the rise and a threat of Chinese interference in the Indo-Pacific looming large. The past experience of the COVID-19 pandemic is an important lesson in streamlining diplomatic and economic ties. A better India-ASEAN partnership means a better Asia. While challenges remain, India remains a close ally to the ASEAN countries and is committed to work together with them for a better future. As Prime Minister Modi said, the 21st century is the century of India and ASEAN countries. Jayan Dasu's report for DD India.
The Chinese Navy is expanding its footprint in the Indo-Pacific. It's found a new home in Cambodia as it ramps up its military presence and power projection in the region. Now, recent satellite images of Cambodia's Ream naval base seem to confirm the growing fears that China is expanding its military footprint beyond the disputed islands in the South China Sea. A corvette of the Chinese Navy was seen berthed alongside a new Chinese-built pier that's big enough to accommodate larger vessels. Now, just so you know, a corvette is a small warship smaller than a frigate or a destroyer. It's designed for defending a coast. A corvette is known for its speed and maneuverability. Onshore, there are other facilities built by China which are presumed to be for the use of the Chinese Navy. When put together, the presence of the corvette and other Chinese facilities in the northern portion of Cambodia's Ream naval base confirm Beijing's strategy to rule the waters of the Indo-Pacific. So, Why does China want a military presence overseas? Is it to protect its interests? If so, what are these interests? Is it a new way of projecting one's power? Or is China competing with the United States? The answer probably lies in China's intention to rule the oceans. Officially, China has only one overseas military base, in Djibouti, in the Horn of Africa. But don't let that fool you. Djibouti hosts the militaries of France, Italy, Japan, and the US as well. Now, this is no coincidence. It's all about securing strategic access, and China is no different. Now, coming back to Cambodia, Cambodia denies the speculation that China has a permanent military presence in the Ream Naval Base, which is located in the southern part of this Southeast Asian country. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just China that helped Cambodia build the Ream port. It was the US. The project was a collaboration between the US and Cambodian governments until 2017. But after a political turmoil, Cambodia changed tack and it went ahead and joined hands with China. Now, Xi Jinping's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative was launched in 2013. In 2017, China financed 70% of Cambodia's road and bridge development. By 2020, the structures built with US money near the Ream port were dismantled. China stepped in a big way. It began leading with its own set of infrastructure development. 2 Chinese corvettes were regularly seen in the Ream port since December 2023. So it raises questions about China's intentions. Now, here's something that you need to know. Cambodia's constitution does not allow a foreign nation to own any part of its port or lease it. But here's the catch. The constitution allows friendly countries to use Cambodia's ports if and when required, and China was quick to seize the opportunity. Here's what you need to understand. The Ream Naval Base holds geostrategic and geopolitical significance for China. For one, it's close to the Malacca Strait. Now, the Malacca Strait is a critical choke point through which 70% of China's energy imports pass. Cambodia is located right next to Vietnam and Thailand. China's presence in the Ream port will worry Vietnam's naval port at Cam Ranh Bay. Vietnam and China have a long history of disputes, maritime dispute in particular. China's so-called Nine Dash Line stakes claim to almost the whole of South China Sea. And that impinges on the sovereignty of countries such as Vietnam. Here, Vietnam is not alone. There are other countries in the region that have similar territorial disputes with China on account of China's creeping expansionism. But Cambodia's is now the only port where China has invested. China's game plan comes a long way, with ownership in at least one port on every continent except Antarctica. Of the 129 projects, 115 are active, whereas the remaining 14 port projects have become inactive because they have been either cancelled or suspended. Now, China has a presence or a potential base in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Tanzania, Mauritius, Maldives and Myanmar. That's not all. China's invested $10.4 billion in Tanzania's ports and $3.9 billion in Sri Lanka. China has invested another $1.5 billion to build 3 ports in Cambodia, and Ream is one of them. Now, China is mostly developing commercial seaports or free trade zones in some of these countries that overlook or abut the Indian Ocean. Now, the question that is agitating many a mind in the region is this. What if these commercial ports are used for military purposes? In February 2019, the Washington Post newspaper published from the US reported the presence of Chinese troops in Central Asia based on photographs and interviews conducted in Tajikistan. Also, China has fully militarized at least 3 of the several islands it has built in the disputed South China Sea. It's arming them with anti-ship and anti-aircraft missile systems, laser jamming equipment and fighter jets in an increasingly aggressive manner that threatens all nations operating nearby. In 2023, China began to build a dedicated port to support deep-sea research in the disputed South China Sea. As of September 2023, China has signed 70 bilateral and regional shipping agreements with 66 countries and regions. Today, China's shipping routes and service networks cover major countries and regions worldwide. The rapid enhancement of the so-called commercial ports by China is causing anxieties to military planners in the US. By expanding to Pakistan's Gwadar port and Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, China's intention seems to be more than what it appears to be. So to come back to the question we asked at the top of the show, is this all part of a broader, more ambitious Chinese plan? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, China's maritime ambitions are no longer about just trade. They're about power. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Voice of the Global South. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.